And we're back.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
You know, Param, we thought we knew what to expect from 2017. Encounter Codex in the spring, Starfinder taking the coveted Gen Con release, and as usual, some kind of adversary book in November, as adversaries books come out then, and only then. Only then. And then everything we thought we knew was a lie when Paizo announced Bestiary 6 would be released March 2017.
Yes, so that is obviously...
we don't know what to expect anymore.
No. So here to join us to talk about the Bestiary 6, Pathfinder Worldscape, and other things, including Starfinder, and hopefully what's going on, is Erik Mona from Paizo Incorporated. It's so weird to say Incorporated.
You can just say Paizo. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Erik. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to talk with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's fun about you is that we don't really need an outline. We just know we could say 2 words and you'll come up with stories and anecdotes.
It's hard to shut me up once I get started,
right.
I guess.
We'll also get the few pauses to as they think, oh, can I announce this or is this not announced? You can say anything you want.
That's right. That's true. And if I mess up and say something I shouldn't, then I only have myself to discipline.
Right. Now,
so you could really trick some good stuff out of me today, you guys.
Now, this is a good time to remind that we are recording in front of a live audience on Twitch who are in the chat room and already chatting. So if the audience has any questions, please feel free to type them. We will be relaying those questions to Erik throughout the show.
Our question convention is you have 2 sentences. 1 sentence to set up the question and 1 sentence to ask the question. Anything longer than that, and I will try and trim it down on the fly or ignore it because it's too long, guys. Right. Just a heads up.
And there's no guarantee that our guest has to answer the question.
I'll do my level best.
All right, so let's just start with March. What is going on? We've got a Bestiary outside of November. We don't know what's happening with the Encounter Codex. So just lay it out. What happened to March? What's
the Encounter Codex, which we announced at PaizoCon, turned out it's an idea that kept getting better and better. And so the outline for the book is very complex, lots of interlinking parts. So lots of different ways to slice up the encounters, lots of different ways to use encounters together, lots of ways to put them on different flip mats. And then it's kind of the idea was what if we put together a bunch of encounters that kind of use the full service of the Pathfinder brand. So they're based off of flip mats, they use pawns, they tie into a bunch of other subsystems and things like that. And at the end of the day, when we parceled it out to a whole bunch of different freelancers and got everything back, it became clear to us that we had created such an intricate plan that making it all work together was going to take significantly more time and effort than we kind of had given all the other stuff that we're doing this year, what with Starfinder and with some other big initiatives that we haven't even talked about publicly yet. And so I sat down with my team and we took a real honest look at the schedule and said, we can do this book and we can do this book really well. We might not be able to do this book really well, in the spring term. And so what we did is we took a look at what else we were going to do in 2017 and kind of shuffled some things around. And one of the things that we had not announced, but that I think a lot of people had sort of figured we might do, just because of, like you said, the pattern of expectation, was Bestiary 6. And indeed, we had been noodling around with some plans for Bestiary 6. We were able to move those plans forward significantly because bestiaries are something that we've done a number of times. We've kind of got it figured out in terms of how to put them together, how to develop them. And so I moved that book to the spring slot. The interesting thing here is that it's not just a straight swap. So Encounter Codex doesn't swap to the winter book, or the fall book, I guess I should say, where it originally was slated. I put something else in that book, in that slot, because in the meantime, we came up with an idea I liked even more than Encounter Codex. So Encounter Codex is still being developed, it's still being worked on, but it's kind of off on the sideboard right now, waiting for its moment to strike. So that's really, I mean, it's somewhat prosaic and pedestrian, but we wanted to give it more time, and thought that it would benefit from more time. And in the meantime, we kind of had already sort of started on B6 and had a lot of really cool ideas for what we could do there, and so it just seemed like a smart swapperoo.
Okay.
So does that mean we can expect Encounter Codex maybe at Gen Con, or are we talking about 2018?
Well, we haven't announced Gen Con releases formally yet. I think we're about to announce April in a couple of weeks here. And so I don't really want to say necessarily, but I think I could say no. We're not going to put it out at Gen Con. Gen Con is really, the focus at Gen Con is going to be on Starfinder. We've got the Starfinder core rulebook. We've got the launch of the Starfinder Adventure Path. We've got a couple of other Starfinder-related things that we haven't announced yet. And so we really kind of don't want our own attention and the attention of everyone else to be kind of jockeying between a couple of different products. Now, that said, just because Starfinder will be alone in an August release doesn't mean that we won't have other significant Pathfinder releases between Bestiary 6 and Starfinder. So I would say, and I have to be very careful about what I say because we haven't even come close to announcing anything in this range, but there are more Pathfinder hardcovers coming out in 2017 than anyone outside this building knows of right now.
Oh, excellent.
Ooh.
We were worried
so
that
that
wasn't the case.
A lot of people were a little concerned because when you say, okay, we're going to do Starfinder in August, and people are generally, I mean, I'm really taken aback by how excited people seem to be about Starfinder. I just got back from Dragon Con, and in our Paizo product Q&A, I'd say like 85% of the questions were about Starfinder. People are really excited about it. I think a natural question is like, okay, well, if this focuses on Starfinder for August, maybe I'm not interested in Starfinder. I'm a Pathfinder player. What am I going to have? And that's a very good question, and we want to make sure there's good answers to that question. And so our gnomes are hard at work on a couple of surprises that we've got up our sleeves that I think will leave Pathfinder players in particular really, really satisfied and happy. I think it's fair to say that Starfinder's effort, which is considerable, is not going to measurably, not in a major way, impact our Pathfinder releases.
Okay, so now every time we
putting out hardcovers in August because that people only have so much money to spend. We only have so much time to do development and editing and all that stuff.
So it's interesting because anytime we've talked about Gen Con 2017 with Paizo people, and since Starfinder was announced, there's always been this kind of like no one wants to be the bearer of bad news, but it really, what I was reading into it was that there really wouldn't be much focus on Pathfinder in that like time frame.
I mean, we'll be launching the Ruins of Aslan Adventure Path at that con. We'll have a player companion and a we've got so much crazy stuff happening at now that I'm in the mix of it, and I'm like, oh, we've got a player companion, and then we have a campaign, and I'm like, oh, well, that campaign setting product actually has a chance to transmogrify into something else that's just like majorly exciting and cool.
Wow.
And so there's going to be cool stuff for Pathfinder Faux Show coming out in August. There'll be some really cool stuff coming out in the couple of months before that as well. So, unless you're a subscriber or someone who goes to their game store every month, there's going to be plenty at the show. I think that's going to seem new and be new to Pathfinder players as well, of course, to Starfinder players. It's just the thing that's going to drop, that first moment of the first day is going to be Starfinder, and I expect that will be the thing most people are really excited about, but I don't want people to be excited about just one thing. I gotta add a bunch of stuff, including some bombs I just dropped on my staff like 3 hours ago. Where there was members of my staff who weren't even exactly sure of like some of the crazy plans I'm concocting. So it's a really interesting year. I would say more so than almost any year, and this is probably because of the Starfinder thing. It's just you guys started off the interview by basically saying, well, every year there's an adversary book, and it comes out in November, and then in once it's going to be a codex, and then it'll be a bestiary, and bird. And like, I'm very cautious and nervous to some degree about it just being so like de rigueur. It's like, oh yeah, okay, Bestiary 6, great. That's the winter book. You know, it's like I want to do some really crazy fun stuff we've never done before. I want to release some stuff in orders people aren't necessarily expecting, and keep people on their toes a little bit, because we're doing so much exciting fun stuff with Starfinder in 2017. It's like I don't want to forget our main lover, which is Pathfinder. We got to have some exciting, cool stuff there too. So I would say it's quite unusual that there's been this much change in, internally in the schedule and stuff as late as we've done it. But it's all because of we'll be having these conversations, like, for instance, moving Encounter Codex, and someone said, well, I think it was Bolvin, and he's like, well, there was this book I was going to pitch. And I'm like, oh my God, that's a great idea for a book. Let's do it, And so, as long as I can, I want to keep it exciting, and and if I'm super stoked about a product idea, and my staff is looking around going, ooh, that tells me that's something we should pursue when we still have time to do it. So the story of Pathfinder for the last, almost since the beginning, is getting better and better at the process, getting better at trying to ship books on time, and I think there's almost a danger of it becomes just a mechanical process. And so I'm actually, even though it's a little bit frantic, where I'm like, okay guys, everything after August is fungible and we might change it tomorrow, there's a sense of that's pretty cool, and as long as it's exciting, fun stuff, and we're making the changes late by our own standards, but early enough so that it doesn't impact the quality of it, or the the timeline of the outline, or the freelancing or whatever. It's I don't know. I don't mean to scare my staff, but I'm kind of enjoying the madcap. We'll seal this schedule month by month, when I feel like it. If there's a great idea, I'm going to try and find a way to do it. So that's really the story of 2017 this year, and I'm very excited by what's to come. Not just on the Starfinder front, but really, because I've been thinking about it a lot lately, almost especially on the Pathfinder front. Starfinder is so cool, but it's it's new and everybody expects it to be cool. It's how do you make something cool with your 15th hardcover book? That to me is almost more of an interesting challenge. There's an element of process and just management and work where it's okay, this is the new Pathfinder book for this month, but it's when something comes where I'm oh sweet, that tells me that there's probably a lot of the audience will feel the same way. So yeah, 2017.
You've certainly made
I have a feeling a lot of people were. Go ahead, Pam.
So you've certainly made our prediction episodes a lot more difficult this year.
I think that's kind of exciting,
if our job's too easy, why do they listen to us?
Well, and I think that there's an element too of if you kind of know what's going to happen every month, then you just start almost to take it for granted. There was an element. Part of it, I think that honestly, if I'm getting into the secret history of Starfinder a little bit, is part of what happened to me, and all of us in the game industry are sensitive souls. We're all artistes, even if we're in the management or graphic design or any step of it. We're all really self-conscious, and we want people to like what we do, and when someone doesn't like what we do, I think we take it sometimes a little bit hard, and when people love what we do, it's kind of sometimes that recharge your batteries in a way that you can put into the next project. And I last year we did Pathfinder number 100, which was a huge deal for us, and it was I remember, and I've told you guys this story 100 times, probably even just on No Direction, but it's I had to make Lisa promise that we would really, my boss, Lisa Stevens, the owner of the company, I had to make her promise that at the very least she would release up to Pathfinder number 6, so that we wouldn't be haunted for our whole lives about how does Rise of the Runelords end. She's like, yes, Eric, I promise. And so for me, the idea that we actually put out the 100th volume of Pathfinder was just a shocking accomplishment, and so we made it an extra special long issue, and we brought NPCs from every adventure path we'd done. We got writers from every adventure path to write it. I wrote a big article about Eridan, which was one of the biggest sort of secrets of the campaign setting since the very beginning, and a couple of people seemed to care. It was I don't want to sell it short, but it was just kind of there was this moment where there was this thing that I was really excited about, and I think part of it's just adventure paths take a long time for people to read and to process and to play, and that was an extra thick one, and to make matters even more complex, it was like the third or fourth volume in the adventure path just because of the way the numbering broke down. But I remember like thinking like, okay, can't wait to hear what people said about Pathfinder 100. You know, it's just like crickets for a long time, and I started to think like, you know, are people taking this for granted? You know, like, is it just because every month there's a new Pathfinder? Yeah, okay, it's 100, but it's just there was 99 before this, so, you know, who really cares? So I wanted to, like, really do something that would shake things up and make people excited and interested and kind of rekindle their excitement about something brand new. And that's one of the reasons why, when I was looking at the 2017 schedule overall, you know, we'd been tinkering with the idea of doing a science fantasy role-playing game forever. And I was just finally like, let's do this. You know, the time is now. We gotta just kind of. I just don't want to be taken for granted. I just don't want to just kind of have people go like, well, okay, this is the player book slot and this is the GM book slot, and there's going to be, you know, 2 years from now it'll be Bestiary 7. You know, I just like, maybe not. I think it's more interesting if people are on their toes.
Is that your impression of us? Do we come off like, oh yeah, of course the Bestiary 6 was coming out in November?
No. I mean, and again, it's like you got to remember, like, there's like a sense of like sensitivity and narcissism and stuff like that. So it's like, I'm sure if you go online, I'm sure there's like really positive reviews about it. I'm not saying nobody cared, but it was just like, it wasn't quite the milestone in terms of the zeitgeist that I thought it might be, given how much effort we put into it and what it kind of meant to us personally. And maybe I'm wrong. You know, maybe there's the 500 comment thread on Paizo.com I just haven't seen about, you know, how brilliant the Eridan article was and how great James's adventure was and all that. And I'm sure there is a lot of positive feedback. I don't want to you know, discount that. But I just, you know, it just got me in the mindset of like, how do we blow the doors off of things? How do we really do something that excites people and that's new and that, you know, and also that excites us, you know, because like I said, Starfinder is something we've been tinkering with almost as long as Pathfinder. I think Jason and I both had, you know, folders on our computer called Starfinder where it's like, ooh, if ever we get to a science fantasy game, we should totally do something like this. You know, here's an idea for a feat that I had or whatever, right? And so, you know, when I was like, yep, now we're doing it, I think people were like, yeah, that makes sense. You know, that's something we wanted to do for a long time. And yeah, so just trying to keep things exciting.
So now, going into this, I have a feeling there were a lot of people that were expecting kind of like the exact opposite of the reaction you're giving them, that they heard Bestiary 6 was coming out, they figured Counter Codex had problems, and you were just doing the book you knew you could do, but mainly you were focusing on Starfinder. But it's really great to see just this new energy of like, no, you're completely wrong. We're not done with Pathfinder. There is so much more with Pathfinder.
Not even close. I mean, like there's more we can do. There's more we can do, and there's more that we can do that I think in some cases people will go, oh yeah, like I can't believe they didn't do that, you know. And then there's sometimes we'll do something and people will be like, what? You know, I didn't expect that at all, you know. And so that's the reaction I'm trying to go for. The reaction I'm not trying to go for is ho hum, you know. And you know, and I think it's ironic that in some ways that I'm saying that within the context of like Bestiary 6, you know, it's like, okay, there's 5 bestiaries. I mean, one of the reasons Bestiary 6 is exciting to me is that, to my knowledge, no fantasy role-playing game has ever done 6 monster books. I think 5 was the top. The record. It's the ones that had numbers after their names, and so so that appeals to me to some degree. But we're also doing some really exciting stuff with Bestiary 6. You know, we're really getting into like some of the archfiends. We're going to do all the Lords of the Nine Hells. We're going to do a bunch of the prominent demon lords. We're getting some high level stuff. We're doing some cool new low level stuff. You know, we've got some Lovecraftian elements in there. We've got a lot of really neat monsters. I think one of the things that blows me away every time we do a monster book, ever since about like Bestiary, I'd say Bestiary 4 and 5 both fit into this category, because up until 3 you're still knocking off like really key monsters, like, okay, well, we didn't finish this, we didn't even touch this one prominent outsider race or what have you. So like, you know, I think the monsters through Bestiary 3 are all really solid, just indisputably. But every time we put, you know, from then on a new monster book on the schedule, there is a little part of me who's just like, okay, you know, what are we putting in here? The Keebler elves and, you know, Noid from Domino's Pizza, you know, like what's left? And I'm always just blown away by like, oh my God, there's so much cool stuff still in here. There's great monsters that come from, the campaign setting books and the adventure path books. There's great monsters that come from mythology. And then every time there's always one or two or three monsters where someone's like, oh, we haven't done the blank, and I'm just like, what? How in the world did we go 5 monster books without doing the Krampus, for example? We got to do the Krampus.
We're talking about Krampus in chat, actually.
Yeah, and so like stuff like that, and so I'm really excited. My current plan for Bestiary 6 is cover, because we've got a lot of archfiends, the 4 horsemen are in there, and a lot of like big nasty evils. Is that the cover I think is going to be like Mephistopheles and a couple of archfiends and demons and stuff, and it's going to say Bestiary 6, and in the ad I'm just going to like spray paint 2 extra 6s after the 6, Bestiary 666, and like I think the headline I want to use is Satanic Panic. I'm like getting really excited. And I'm excited about the marketing for a book. It's really lit a fire somewhere.
No, we've always had that concern right before we opened the Bestiaries, but we haven't been disappointed yet that you've all kept coming up with unique things. So you're saying I was about to ask what so this is the demonic Bestiary?
I think that in some ways this is like the big bad Bestiary. If you think back in like D&D terms, there was those not appendices, but like little subsections in Monster Manual 2 where it's like, and here's a list of a bunch of the demon lords, and here's all the archfiends, and we never really did that for Pathfinder. We've done them here and there in different products, but we've never done them in a Bestiary. There's always that line between what's a Pathfinder campaign setting thing and what's a more sort of generic Pathfinder RPG approach to stuff, and I think that's maybe precluded us from getting into the nitty-gritty on some of those high-powered, unique outer planar entities and stuff like that. But I don't know, I'm getting a little sick of that division myself, and so we're just kind of tearing the bandage off and really kind of making a Pathfinder book that has Pathfinder stuff in it, which should be pretty cool for people. It's going to be cool for me.
In chat, King of Brock suggests that Bestiary 6 is the metal Bestiary.
There's something to that. Like there is. It's like it's the most hardcore a Bestiary yet. James Jacobs was really heavily involved in helping us with the list this time. With Jason and Wes and myself and others as well. But so you can be sure that a lot of James's kind of tastes are going to seep in, and as the author of a lot of the stuff we've published on demons, and as the guy who wrote the Demonomicon of Igwil series back in our dungeon days, it's kind of like something we've really been wanting to do for a long time. But it's not just that. I want to be clear. Like there's first level monsters in the book. There's lawful good creatures in the book. It's a full service Bestiary, but it's also got it's got a bit of a focus, I think, on some of the really big nasty bastards that you want to kill.
Can we talk about James Jacobs for a second?
If we have to.
A lot of your staff's been getting a lot of promotions and like getting more responsibilities, and it seems like for the most part they're just taken off of James's plate. And it feels like James is not the kind of guy that can have an empty plate. So, like, what is he doing with all this free time he suddenly has?
Wouldn't you like to know? No, James is doing all kinds of stuff. James is our creative director, and so one of the things that gives us an opportunity to do is really set him loose on a whole bunch of special projects and things like that. He's also, like, what he just finished doing, honestly, was the Curse of the Crimson Throne adventure path. So as the original editor of the Curse of the Crimson Throne AP, he was the ideal person to go through and update it. That was obviously done for 3.5, so he did all the rules updates. He's also someone who's paid a lot of attention to the various comment threads and things, and so whenever we redo an adventure path in hardcover, we've done it twice, but so like both times, one of the things we've been able to do is then go back, and there's been commentary on Curse of the Crimson Throne since 2008. So people said this encounter confused me a little bit, or I really like this part, or I wish there was more of this element in there. James has been paying attention to that, for the last 8 years, and so he went back over all that feedback, and just because he was the guy with his hands on the wheel back then, he was the right guy to have be in charge of the Curse of the Crimson Throne hardcover. Now that comes out in October. It's, I think, I think it's probably the best looking Pathfinder book we've done so far. I mean, it's really, really gorgeous. Sarah Robinson, our star art director, really went above and beyond in terms of like, there's massive 2-page spread illustrations. There's new takes on some old characters. There's all kinds of new illustrations. There's gorgeous border treatments, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful book. And so James was the architect of that. James is currently architecting one of those secret books that I can't talk about, that is going to come out between now and Gen Con, or between, I should say, between Bestiary 6 and Gen Con. So he's hard at work on some really, really interesting, as yet to be announced things. And then, of course, he takes a hand in our adventure paths. He takes a hand in our campaign settings. And he does, he also just did a player companion fairly recently called Paths of the Righteous. That's a prestige class book in our player companion line that's going to come out soon. And James has long been a proponent for prestige classes, which is something we haven't really done a ton of, in Pathfinder. I think in some ways our early Pathfinder development was a reaction to what we were doing in Dragon and Dungeon magazines, and it's like we certainly did a lot of prestige class. Third edition was just littered with prestige classes. So at first we were kind of like, we wanted to explore more archetypes and some of the other ways of kind of customizing your character, and then and I think for a little while there, prestige classes sort of fell by the wayside. But James really likes prestige classes. He likes the idea that it's something that's like a pre-existing group or a organization that you kind of join, and there's a little bit more to the background to it. James is really big on flavor and background, and he really likes stuff that is rooted in the campaign setting and that gives you a sense of there, and so he just did that book and was able to outline it and develop it, and so he got to show us all what he has been clamoring for quite some time with more prestige classes. So James is like kind of our creative overlord guy who we use on a lot of special projects at this point. I think that he will undoubtedly at some point go back to architecting an entire adventure path, but we've also got people like Adam Daigle and Crystal Frazier who have been kind of coming up through the ranks for several years, and they've got great stories and good ideas to tell. And so, again, knowing we wanted to do some special stuff this year, it seemed like a good time to give James some special projects. He's also working on the modules line, and the modules line's a weird one for us. It's one that's really bounced around a lot between different kind of caretakers over the years, and I think there's been times where the module line has seemed really key to the setting and really vibrant, and I think there's been times where it seemed like kind of just like, oh, here's a neat little one-shot I can do, that doesn't really have a lot of connectivity to other stuff. And James, being the connectivity guy, is very keen to do some modules that really kind of move the setting and involve key NPCs and key locations and things. And so I'm setting him loose on that as well. So James, a busy boy.
Now, you said some plans you've got between Bestiary 6 and Gen Con 2017, but you also said you're kind of changing things month by month. How far into the schedule are you confident that that's actually the schedule?
I would say everything through May is for sure. And basically what happens is we have to solicit to our distributor. So what that means is like you write a paragraph. It's basically like what the descriptions on Paizo.com are, more or less, and eventually they get modified into the back cover copy of the books oftentimes. But it's like, okay, we're going to do a book that's called Goblin Lords of Golarion, and then it's 32 pages, and we're not doing that. But but like, at least not yet. Let me write that note down. But like, so we'll say here's what it costs, and here's its ISBN number, and and at that point, you certainly can change the details of a book after you've announced it, but it's pretty gauche. It kind of, there's a lot of opportunities for mistakes and things in the system. The price doesn't get changed, a book doesn't get deleted, Barnes and Noble orders it, and then it's just a mess. So I would say once stuff gets solicited formally, then there's no way to change. So I've got a schedule right in front of me, right off camera, that I can tell you what our current plans are on virtually every line all the way through December of 2017, but there is kind of a moving line that right now is hovering between March and April where there's no going back. So it would be very difficult for me to change something in April at this point. It would not be tremendously difficult for me to change something in May. But, like once a product is... We were just in a meeting earlier today where we formally kicked off the April products for April 2017. So that means that all of the developers and the editors were sitting in a room. We said, okay, here's kind of the books that we think we're doing. Let's just brainstorm and talk about, maybe Wes and James and I have talked about it, but other people on the team haven't had a chance to even process it yet. So then they'll say, oh, it'd be cool to put this piece of content in that book, or how does that work with this? And then we'll talk it through. And basically from that meeting, that's when we start doing the outline and start lining up freelancers. And with I guess the major exception of Encounter Codex, I really don't like to mess around with stuff that's already been sent out to freelancers, because again, it's just kind of messy. And so I would say unlikely that I would change anything that is like, say, in the May or June region right now, but I could change it. And I think that for example, I'm looking at the schedule right now, and in the player companion line, post August, there's still a couple of to be determined, so we're still open to a really great idea from one of the staff, or if one of us has a brainchild, or one of your questions inspires me to do Goblin Lords of Galarian, or whatever. There's still some time to put it down. You don't want to kind of solidify things too early. You want to be able to stay fluid, because maybe there's another player companion that people really, really love, and they say, oh, I'd really love a follow-up to this or something, and I wouldn't want to have to necessarily wait a year or 2 years to be able to slide something like that in.
And when you have a meeting about April and you step outside, are you surprised it's summer?
Well, you got to understand something about Seattle. It's not really looking that much like summer anymore here. It's getting gloomy already. Yeah, we're so far out ahead from where we were 5 years ago, just in terms of, having actual project management at the company. That's a huge change. We used to just kind of do the rhythm method, which is why a lot of our books that we announced for like October would come out in December and stuff. It's just like, we're doing the best we can, but we didn't really have all the processes figured out. We got a lot more people on staff now than we did, 5 years ago and stuff like that. So it just requires planning further and further in advance all the time. I have products I know that we're doing 3 years from now. I've got, wow. But will they actually be in that month? Will they be the things that we do? It's more like the further ahead you go, the more ephemeral those plans become. But I've got some pretty concrete plans too. Don't get me wrong. We tend to decide the big things like the adventure paths and the hardcover books furthest out in advance, because those are the things that involve the most planning. Stuff like a flip mat or something like that, we have a lot more flexibility to slide in a really cool idea on a relatively short notice, because it's one guy in Stephen Randy McFarland here in the office will draw it in pen and ink or pencil, and then we'll send it out to Jason Engel. So it's like two people, whereas with a hardcover rule book, there might be, if you include all the artists and stuff, there might be 30 people involved in making that book.
All right, we've got kind of a backlog of chat questions.
Shut up! I'm so sorry, you guys.
No worries.
I'll try and
no, it's perfect.
I think they're more than happy to listen to what you have to say.
I get ready to ask a question, and then you barrel right into what I was going to ask you. So this is great.
Yeah. So the only heads up here is that some of these may seem out of nowhere. It's because it's in reference to something that happened like an hour ago in the conversation. Yeah. Right. So Zerm wants to know, what are the chances we'll get a Nidal source book?
High. Eventually, we'll do it. We're kind of, there is a list at the company of like countries we haven't done source books for yet, and Nidal is a very high one on the list. So yeah, yes, there'll be a Nidal source book, and there's a lot of hints of material here and there that I think that we can incorporate in very well. Some of Leanne Merciel's books, Night Glass and things, have a lot of really great, and the Pathfinder Tales line have a lot of really great details about Nidal that'll be fun to gamify, if you will. So that's very high on our wish list as well.
We just got a slew of people talking about their favorite sections in the campaign set. Gavin Nex.
That's tough. Geb is probably more likely than Nex. The problem with Nex is it's my baby. I made it up and am the chief kind of architect of that country. Back when we started making the campaign set, the way we did the campaign setting is kind of an interesting 2-hour diversion, but the short version of it is we sat down, we kind of said, what kind of campaigns do people like to play? Oh, well, there's the campaign where you never leave the big city. There's a campaign that's really heavily involved with political intrigue. There's the campaign where 2 neighboring nations are at war. There's the campaign where, you're in the jungle, yada, yada, yada. And so then we took those things and then distilled them into like short sentence fragments, and so like Cheliax, if you look in the original Gazetteer, that's kind of like your best window into what the original campaign setting looked like, the one Jason and I co-wrote back in 2008. And that thing has like a little subhead under each country's name. So Cheliax, it says Diabolical Empire in Decline. Galt, it says Eternal Revolution. And so that's kind of that's the nubbin, and then Jason and I expanded that for every country in the world. Of course, the Adventure Path team was working on Varissia and a little bit in Belkzen at the time, and so James and James Sutter and Wes also had a lot to do with architecting that. James wrote most of the original gods were from his campaign setting, James Jacobs, and then what we did is we kind of parceled out the world, and so Jason and I took probably the lion's share of the countries because it was our that was our assignment, but then each of the members of the staff got to basically pick a country that was their country. And so James Sutter's country was Hermia, and Jeremy Walker's country was Brevoy, and so on and so forth. And so each employee was kind of like the master of a country that was theirs, and so they could kind of, back in the day, they would be the person who would keep track of all the continuity, and they'd kind of be the custodian of that country. And so you wouldn't like write an adventure that killed the king of one of your colleagues' countries without talking to your colleague, and so that way each of us took ownership over key parts of the campaign setting. And Nex was really kind of mine. I wrote like probably I conceived of a great deal of the countries in Golarion, but like Nex was always like my special project. And I've been writing adventures using Nex, the Arc Wizard, from the beginning. And so really nobody gets to write a Nex book but me. But I've got lots of other cool projects I'm working on too, so I've just got to find the right time for it. So there'll be more Nex stuff eventually. It's just like somebody's got to get me to stop writing comic books and coming up with crazy books to torture my staff with and things like that in the meantime.
Now
we will get to the comic book.
Yes,
I
have a point on I'm so super surprised to hear that you are Nex but not Geb, because I never hear
both.
of the two.
Yeah, I did both of them. The countries that the countries I guess that I identify most as mine in the campaign setting, and I want to make very clear that like when I say mine, I mean like the core concept and the 5 paragraphs in the Gazetteer. Other people have taken these in totally different directions, and well, not totally different directions, but I don't want to minimize the the input that my staff and freelancers and stuff have added to these countries. But basically, I would say Nex, Geb, Galt, Cheliax, Andoran. Those are the ones that I would say. Lands of the Linorm Kings, Irison, those were all kind of mine, so to speak. But Nex was always on a different level. The Pathfinder Tales novella that I wrote for the web fiction a long time ago is set in Nex. I was writing an adventure called The Spire of Nex for the longest time. That I might still do that. I have a whole outline for a Pathfinder Tales novel based on Nex, based on The Spire of Nex. Then I trashed that because I wasn't happy with it. And then I wrote an entire another outline that involves Nex and things. And so I'll get to all that stuff eventually. The Pathfinder Worldscape comic, the titular Worldscape, is a dimension within the Spire of Nex, so Nex is even in the comic. That's my deal, more so than anything else. There's the stuff I invented and then just kind of like gave to other people, and then there's the stuff that I'm just like, under no circumstances can other people mess with this. Mm-hmm. And that would be Nex and really Eridan, I would say, are the two things that I'm fiercely protective of.
Okay. Now,
I
speaking
keep wanting
of,
to switch over to the comic.
we got
but,
to do it
like,
now.
I do want to get through
we'll
these
get
questions.
To it. We'll get to it. I'm in no hurry. These episodes go 3-4 hours, right?
I think we technically have you for 15 more minutes, unless you can go long.
I can go long. I don't
Oh,
care.
sweet.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
Param, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to use that nice setup sheet he gave us so that we could transition to talking about Worldscape.
Oh, but the question.
Okay, let's do this. Easy one.
Lightning round.
Easy question from Zern. Bestiary 6, Wayne Reynolds cover, yes, no?
Yeah, of course.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ordinary. I mean, that is kind of the one chink in the armor, I guess. Of moving it off of its original time. Usually, when we solicit the hardcover books, we like to do it with the final art, and because things were a little bit out of sequence, the final piece of art's gonna. I think he's doing it right now, so it'll be a while yet. But yeah, Wayne. For the foreseeable future, Wayne does all of our hardcover covers, particularly in the RPG line.
N. Caledormus says, will Bestiary 6 be particularly Starfinder friendly?
No.
Okay.
No. It's hard to say what is meant by Starfinder friendly. It probably won't have a ton of creatures that I guess I would consider aliens in it. In part because we knocked a lot of those off in Bestiary 4 and 5. But also because we're going to be doing a whole bunch more for Starfinder very shortly thereafter. And so, no. One of the things that I've been saying about Starfinder is we're calling it conceptually compatible with Pathfinder. And so, like, skill checks work the same way. You roll a 20-sided die, you add your ability score modifier and your ranks in the skill, but the list of skills are different, right? So it's how to play, it's just not a one-for-one. And so Starfinder itself, the book will include some tips about, like, okay, how do you take a Pathfinder monster and kind of quick bash it into a Starfinder monster, and I suppose vice versa. But we're making Bestiary 6 as a Pathfinder book. We want it to be an awesome Pathfinder book because, Lord knows, the spotlight will be on Starfinder soon enough.
Well,
Sooner than you might think.
What?
Leave that there.
I'm just going to predict a free RPG day bonus Bestiary style thing for
who
preview
knows?
book.
That would be a smart idea, but who knows?
You know, Eric. That's who knows.
I mean, who other than me and my staff?
Right.
Who in the chat room knows?
I think some of your staff are in the
Greyheim
chat
says, I know Starfinder is coming out next year, but any Pathfinder modules doing anything using the technology guide in the near future?
No.
Okay.
No.
Is that
Technology
because
Guide's
you
really,
want
really popular? It did very, very well. Another reason why we said, maybe that we should do the Starfinder thing is, like, all of the books. So starting with Distant Worlds, which is, of course, James Sutter's great overview of the Galarian star system, all the way to things like People of the Stars, to the Iron Gods Adventure Path, and then especially to the Technology Guide, all were, like, sales outliers in their trimester or whatever, if you will, to get sort of publishery for a second. But, like, they all sold very, very well. And so rather than kind of do more of, like, bringing technology into Pathfinder, we're kind of going to spend a lot of 2017 going the other way, which is to bring fantasy into the future and stuff with Starfinder. So I think that part of it is we always try to provide options. So if you're not super digging, like, if we're doing a horror adventure path, we'll try and do, like, a module that's, like, super heroic, and I don't mean super heroic, but very heroic, and just, like, straight up fantasy, just because we know people have different tastes. And so I don't want to do a lot of, like, Pathfinder science fantasy at the same time we're doing Starfinder science fantasy. It's not outside the realm of possibility that we'll get back to that. In fact, I think the increased focus we're going to be giving on some of the planets in Galarian star system and Starfinder will probably make people more interested to learn about them within a Pathfinder context. But for right now, Starfinder is going to be Starfinder, and Pathfinder is going to be Pathfinder for the foreseeable future.
We got a question.
So we've actually kind of naturally transitioned more into Starfinder now.
Sure.
Is everyone cool if we kind of cover a little bit of Starfinder, and then, I promise, we will cover Pathfinder Worldscape.
Yay!
I'm super excited about Worldscape.
Yeah, not as excited as me. We'll get to it, I promise.
All right, so Starfinder, we at Gen Con we heard a whole lot, and a whole lot of what we heard at PaizoCon had been developed. There were some changes. We knew more of what was going on. It's been a month now. Wow, has it only been a month since Gen Con?
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy. Okay, well, in the last month,
how can it have been less than a month since?
Right?
Oh.
Okay, so maybe there hasn't been as much development on Starfinder as possible, but based on the feedback you got with the playtest and whatnot that happened at Gen Con, how is Starfinder going?
Starfinder's going really, really well. We are, I would say, all 7 classes are drafted and, in playable form. The races are all pretty much done. About 3/4 of the background material is done. What's not really done yet is a lot of the spells and the equipment and the feats, all the little plugins and stuff like that. We're still kind of working on the core systems, and then some of the integration between the Starship combat system, which is what really we play tested at Gen Con, and some of the character class abilities and things like that could still use a little bit of finesse. But we're looking at starting basically closed play test in earnest in just a couple of weeks. So we're getting really, really close. I've seen draft illustrations of all of the iconic characters for the game, some of which are just mind-blowingly amazing, and some of which still need a little bit of work but are really, really getting there. I've got a meeting tomorrow to discuss what the various spaceships of the various factions in Starfinder look like, so we can get going on that. So we're in this really exciting place where it's all starting to coalesce. We've done a couple of sort of rudimentary play tests, but it's probably within the next couple of weeks, some of the members of the team, I'm hoping, including myself, will be able to sort of start Starfinder campaigns in earnest, because we've finally got enough stuff that even when we don't have a key piece, we can kind of kludge it, whereas before we've still been kind of getting the classes where they need to be and stuff like that. So Starfinder's in a very, very good place. And it's really cool because when James Sutter and Owen Casey Stevens and Rob McCreary, who are the nucleus of the Starfinder team, as they're working on the game rules and the world, Sarah Robinson is working on the visuals, with the team of concept artists. And so it's really great to see things coming together sort of conceptually and mechanically at the same time.
Okay, Param?
Okay, so... Oh, man, I'm sorry. I was doing tech stuff in the background there. I didn't have a question ready.
Okay, no problem. Is there room in Starfinder for both space whales and some kind of chitinous bug ship?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. In fact, I think that both of those things are referred to in the core rulebook, essentially, right? I mean, it's there's definitely... I don't know if, we're going, full-on Spelljammer style 1990s space whales where it's literally a humpback whale in space, but certainly big creatures that fly freely in space, that you might be able to be swallowed by, are certainly out there. And then chitinous, oh hell yeah. In fact, I'm writing a planet for the Starfinder game book right now, where there's just an overview of little snippets of different planets and things. Mm-hmm. And there's probably some chitinous ships in the planet that I'm working on. I had to write a comic, finish that first, and then I'll turn in my month-late 300-word planet to Sutter.
Now,
it's good to be the king.
We've heard a lot about the Starfinder system rules, especially post Gen Con. Now, what we haven't heard a whole lot about is the adventure path. So is there anything you can tell us about Starfinder's adventure path to get us excited?
Let's see. It's there's an adventure in every volume. But I think that what we haven't much talked about is some of the other stuff that's going to be in each volume, and I don't want to spoil. We really haven't talked about the adventure path much at all, and there's more to come on that, in a more formal capacity. But like we're at this, and nothing's totally locked in yet. But like we're talking about, well, okay, if a third or if 2/3 of the volume is the adventure, what is the other third? And there's some really interesting ideas floating around. One of them is, of course, like a bestiary section with new aliens and monsters and stuff. But I think, one of the things we've been discussing that I think could be really, really cool is the spaceships play a really important role in the Starfinder game. Like the assumption is that you are a crew of a spaceship. So from the very beginning, you have a ship, and that ship is like kind of a shared character between all the players in the group. And as you get more powerful and more resources, you could put that into your ship. So one of the things that we wanted to do in the Adventure Path is for each volume of the Adventure Path to include a new ship with a map of the ship with its stats and stuff. And that'll probably most of the time be like a ship inspired from the adventure itself, but maybe not. Maybe it'll just be a cool random ship. So we're going to definitely be putting ships out. We're doing something a little bit different with Starfinder than we did with Pathfinder in that right now the plan is we're going to do the core rule book. Of course, we're going to do an alien book, shortly thereafter, and we'll do one or two hardcover books a year of various different sizes. But like, we aren't going to have a monthly player companion. We're not going to have a monthly campaign setting. We're trying to keep the focus really tight, at least at the beginning. Now, if it sells 100,000 copies and everyone's like, Starfinder, 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 they'll hire a couple more guys and there'll be more Starfinder stuff. But like, for right now, we're trying to kind of, in some ways, kind of go back to that, early Pathfinder mode where it's like you only had to follow a couple of product lines to get the whole picture. And I don't want to sprawl things out too soon or too fast. So the Adventure Path is going to be, I would say, probably the primary way of conveying setting material and the primary regularly released way of conveying some of that stuff. There'll be other stuff. It's kind of like I start thinking about it and I'm like, yeah, well, we really only are going to do, the Adventure Path and then a couple of hardcovers. And then I start thinking like, well, but we'd be really cool to do some flip mats and it wouldn't be that hard. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I got 5 product lines. So I got to be really careful. Like the no-brainers are like pawns. And we'll probably do a pawn set of some kind to go with the alien book. We'll probably do a flip mat, but that's a good example of how things post August could still change. I might still add, a couple of flip mats and a pawn thing that isn't currently on the schedule to the schedule for Starfinder.
I wish to suggest
Sluter
something
in chat is asking about a Starfinder subscription. When will it be available, and will there be any kind of early adopter bonus?
It will be available prior to the release of the Starfinder core rulebook, so it'll definitely be available prior to Gen Con, which I think is the second week of August 2017. And yeah, I think that'd be really cool. We have the charter subscribers for Pathfinder Adventure Path, and really for Pathfinder as a whole. I think it'd be neat to have some kind of benefit for jumping in early. I just don't know what it is yet. Someone's got a $1 million idea. Feel free to put it in chat and these guys will tell me about it. But yeah, we'll do something. Sure. Why not? There'll definitely be a subscription. I've got some thoughts on what that might look like and what it might entail, but I should probably talk to my boss about them before I talk about them online.
I guess the last thing for what's going in the back matter of the AP, you just retired the Pathfinder Journal because that was used to build the world, and the blog post said the world is plenty built now. But the same thing doesn't apply to Starfinder. So will we be expecting Starfinder fiction in the AP at all?
No, we're not.
Oh wow,
yeah,
solid no.
Yeah, no. I would love to do Starfinder fiction in some capacity, but fiction in the APs is always a little bit of a some people love it, some people hate it, and all that. I think we always really liked it because it gave us the opportunity to explore the world with a different voice than, sort of the voice of institutional authority in which you describe the ancient history of countries and stuff. And so, but then once we launched the Pathfinder Tales line of fiction, it was kind of like, is it necessary to have this in multiple different expressions? And the guys and girls who work on Pathfinder Adventure Path are always like, oh, if we could only get those pages to do more campaign support, if I could get another article about the city where this takes place or whatever, that'd be great. And so we're going to try that out for a little while in the APs for Pathfinder and see how it goes. With Starfinder, because it is the only regularly released source for a lot of this type of material, I think at least at first we want to kind of put the focus on the game and a little bit less on the fiction. But that could change. It's just not going to change for the first couple of story arcs.
So we have a couple of $1 million ideas from chat for you. People really seem to want some kind of Ostog of Mars.
Is it,
Oh,
Mr.
what a
Roy
great
says
idea.
Ostog
Okay,
the
done.
Unspaced.
Yep.
Hill
Hill Giant says Ostog doesn't need a spacesuit to go into space.
I mean, that does beg the question, which is if Starfinder is set some indeterminate number of thousands of years from current day Golarion, and we all know Ostog the Unslain is still unslain and it was remained unslain. Is it possible that Ostog, my character from James Jacobs' in-house Pathfinder campaign, is it possible that Ostog the Unslain himself is still alive, like living in Absalom Station? What a great whoever.
You know what? It was groupthink. It really just 4 or 5 different people said something similar all at once.
Such a great idea, you guys. Oh, I love it. I love
I
it.
figure at this point he's like a 2001 Space Odyssey style Star Child.
Oh, I think absolutely.
Ostog the Constellation.
I think he's passed the test of the Starstone personally. I mean, he must be a god, right? If James couldn't find a way to kill him for like a 6 or 7 year long campaign, surely he's immortal, right?
Right.
We'll just go with that. Yeah.
We have several people, Justin Franklin, Jacob Blackmoon, suggesting Starfinder miniatures.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I'd sure love to have him. Yeah.
Justin.
Still trying to figure out how to make that happen, but yeah, it's a no-brainer. I'm a miniatures guy through and through, and so that was one of my first thoughts.
Justin
I
Sledger.
have a feeling there's going to be a lot of demand for the Iron Gods pawn set before there's an official Starfinder pawn set.
That's a good point. There may very well be. Yeah.
So if that's going into second printing anytime soon.
And also, like, now that I'm thinking about it, we did the Starship Corridors map pack,
Sure.
and there's a couple. There's like this Crash Starship flip mat as well, which will probably be pretty popular for that reason.
Justin.
Oh, man.
But wouldn't it be great to have
So
like a
this is
flip mat
awesome.
spaceport or flip mat cantina? I mean, it's so obvious.
Mhm.
I gotta come on here more often. Just get these ideas just keep flowing.
Imperiosaur wants Ostog to be the station's AI.
Oh, that'd be a worthless AI.
Ostog is many things. Intelligent. No. Mm-mm. There are better roles for him. Hey, look at that. He's making a cameo. I was digging around. I keep like ducking and weaving here because I'm trying to find something. I'd show you how messy my desk is, but then you'd see all kinds of secrets. Like, I have like somewhere around here, I have a series of my old buddy Phil Lacefield, who used to work for Paizo, he's got a t-shirt company, and he did some patches, like gamer badges, so it's like you get one that's like TPK, and they're like Girl Scout merit badges, and I sponsored it because he's a friend, and I wanted it to be successful, and as part of that I got little patches of my own, and so I had 50 Ostog the Unslain patches made, and it says Unslain, and if you wear the patch, as long as you're wearing no armor, you get a bonus, on your armor class or something. I don't remember exactly the joke I put on the back, but they're not for sale. I just got a handful of them that I'm bringing to conventions and handing out, if somebody catches me at the right moment. So yeah, there's some bona fide Ostog the Unslain merchandise floating around. In addition, of course, to the beautiful mini mate and the beautiful Reaper miniature and the beautiful Ostog card in the Barbarian class deck for the adventure card game, and one more beautiful Ostog the Unslain miniature yet to come, unannounced.
Ooh,
I guess
all right.
I guess I messed
You
that
just
up.
announced it, I
Yeah,
think.
but there's an Ostog miniature coming soon in another format. I
Well,
had one extra slot, and I've now done, geez, 13 sets of minis with WizKids, and so I had one extra slot, and I was like, what am I going to put in this slot? I'm just puzzled. I thought, no, I know, time for Eric to reward himself, and I did.
finally.
So all of your rewards when Ostog the Unslain comes to pre-painted plastic sometime in 2017.
Well, it's not like there's a dearth of interest in shirtless barbarian miniatures.
I know, right? I mean, I'm certainly interested.
Missouri has suggested that the FTL travel in Starfinder is it's actually having Ostog throw you at whatever distant point you're trying to get to.
Has Sutter or Owen or Rob talked much about FTL travel in Starfinder yet publicly? Do you guys know anything?
Yes, they said that they invented a new dimension or plane or macro plane that it sends you through, and it pulls pieces of where you came from into it as you travel through it.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Is actually that what it kind of does is it punches its way through the great beyond as you're flying, and so like you might have to pass through a region of basically hell as you're jumping from one planet to the other, and certain things might latch onto your ship or whatnot when you're doing FTL. So I think to some degree, every time you jump from one system to another, there's like a chance that you might have an event horizon sort of an event, yeah, so it should be pretty cool. And it's a somewhat violent cutting of the planes, so sometimes the planes themselves are not exactly super excited about you doing that.
So even if you travel through the plane of sunshine and rainbows, those rainbows are going to be pissed.
Well, I don't know. The rainbow's going to be happy. It's hard to say. I don't know that we have a plane of sunshine and rainbows. Like we have, the positive energy plane, which is not a place you want to linger too long. I don't know. Ask Sutter. Anyway, no, but there's danger to FTL travel to some degree, and there is this multiplanar element, which I think is kind of novel and interesting, and I think can lead to a lot of really interesting stories. I read a lot of old science fiction, and I'm reminded of like a Murray Leinster story, and I can't remember the name of it now, but it was in this anthology that I read it's one of those ace doubles from the 60s, and I was really struck by it because it was this great story where a ship becomes disabled like in hyperspace in this sort of non-dimension, and it's like it's basically a death sentence. No one will ever know where you are and all that, and the idea of like becoming stranded in your spaceship, in the outer space of hell or something like that, it's just kind of intriguing to me. The outer space of hell.
All right, Perrin, do you have any other Starfinder questions, or can we move on to Worldscape?
Oh, I can say one more thing about Starfinder that I
yes.
well, I guess I announced it at Gen Con, so you guys might be on top of it, but I also mentioned it at
Dragon Con?
Dragon Con, and probably the most surprised person was Jason Bullman sitting right next to me. For the Alien book that we're going to do shortly after the release of the Starfinder core rule book, one of the differences between the way we want to present aliens in Starfinder and the way we present monsters in Pathfinder is we're looking at doing a 2-page spread for every monster, which gives us an opportunity to run the picture a little bit bigger, have more ecological information about the creatures, but also whenever even remotely conceptually possible, I want to include rules for how to play a character of that race. And so in that way, the monster books become not just a book of things to kill, but also a book of things to be. One of the things we're really excited about with science fiction is just the near limitless opportunity and options that you should have for different aliens and weird creatures and things. I don't think Star Wars would be as interesting as it is without Chewbacca or the Cantina aliens, and we want to give people the opportunity, I think even more so than in Pathfinder, to just play some off the wall goofy stuff. Like I want you to be able to be a protoplasmic, ooze creature. I want you to be able to be a floating spherical psychic sphere or something. If that's what you want to do, and then people like Jason's, their face turns red and they start swallowing and like needing to drink water because he's got to figure out how to make it happen. But now that I've said it publicly 3 times, it's got to happen. So it's one of the ways I get what I want.
I will now
So
be
that is
looking...
cool and exciting, but doesn't that mean that like you've got a lot less space to populate the universe if every single monster entry is going to be 2 pages?
Well, no. I mean, what it means is like if we were to do a 300-page monster book, which we won't necessarily do, that it would have somewhere on the order of slightly more than half of the monsters that Pathfinder one would have. But I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing, because we also haven't revealed how often we're going to be putting out monster books, and how big the monster books will be, and so yeah, I think it'll be a little bit slower and a little bit more deliberate pace of release. But coming into year 8 of Pathfinder, there might be some people who sort of wished for a little bit of a slower pace, first time around, and so we're just experimenting with different ways of doing things with this game. We're not sort of tied into the orthodoxy of we've got to have this many monthly product lines and they've always got to be this number of pages. We're just kind of trying to treat this like, what if we could just make the game that we wanted to make, knowing everything that we know now? Whereas with Pathfinder, not that we don't love the things that we make or really proud of them, but it's like we really were kind of learning as we went. When we started, it was just the adventure path, and then it was like, well, maybe we'll make this core rule book and maybe people will want it, and it's like, oh, holy shit, people really want it, and then it was like, let's do the advanced player's guide, and then that's, I think, when Pathfinder sort of kind of started becoming its own thing, so to speak, and so now it's like, there's an expectation of the rule books are this length and stuff is always presented this way, and if we were to get too crazy about changing it in Pathfinder, I think people would be pretty uncomfortable because they've gotten used to certain patterns and things, but with Starfinder we can just do whatever we want, and there's a tremendous creative freedom in that, and we'll make some mistakes for sure, but like I think we'll do some things that are quite unexpected and that people will really dig.
Yeah, Pathfinder players don't even like the typeset of one of the bestiaries is slightly off of the rest of them.
God bless them.
Well, it was the bestiary with the aberrants in it, so okay.
So it was thematic choices.
Yes. All right.
Hey, Eric.
Yes.
Worldscape.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
How did this come about?
I am one persistent bastard. I think that's pretty much how it came about. So, Pathfinder Worldscape is a new comic from Dynamite. Our comic publisher is now several years running. And what it is it's a big mashup between the Pathfinder iconic heroes who have starred in something like 30 issues of comics for Dynamite so far, with some of their other top fantasy properties. So it crosses over Pathfinder's Sione, Mauricio, Valeros, and Kira with Red Sonja, John Carter of Mars, Tarzan, and a bunch of other pulp and fantasy characters that Dynamite has on their roster. And really, my thinking on that started almost as soon as we signed a deal with Dynamite. Dynamite is really, really good at licensed comics. They have a lot of different properties from a lot of different eras in comic book history and the history of popular fiction, etc., etc., etc. About the time that we started working with them, they had 2 comic series that really caught my eye. One was a comic series called Masks that teamed up a bunch of their pulp heroes, so like the Shadow and the Spider and Doc Savage. And then the other one was a Bill Willingham comic that they did called Legendary, which was a steampunk adaptation of a bunch of their fantasy heroes. So like that Flash Gordon and Red Sonja and Vampirilla and some of their other characters. And so I already knew that Dynamite was in the habit of kind of doing big crossovers between a bunch of their different properties that were all owned by different people, so that they'd figured out how to do kind of the legal negotiating that you would need to do in order to make a project like that work. And I sort of looked at it and I said, okay, so they've done, and then they have another one which I think is called Project Superpowers. It's a bunch of public domain heroes in the 40s that they've put together in a team. And so I said, well, if Dynamite's done this for superheroes and they've done this for steampunk, and they've done this for their pulp heroes, why not do it for fantasy? They've got Red Sonja, they've got John Carter, they've got all these other characters. It'd be really great to put them all together, and if it was a Pathfinder comic, that would give me the opportunity, or Paizo the opportunity, to also do game stats for these characters that people have wanted to see game stats for pretty much forever. I mean, for John Carter of Mars. You know, there have been people who've wanted to see that. I mean, Gary Gygax wrote a game about John Carter of Mars back in the 70s, you know, and so I think back to the old Giants in the Earth series that they did in Dragon Magazine, where they would adapt, you know, back in the wild and woolly time of the 70s, where there's certainly no licensing. They're just like, here's Conan, what the hell, you know? And nowadays you need permission, oddly enough, to do things like that. And so I thought, you know, it would be really, really great to do a fantasy big team up comic. And so I started pitching that to Dynamite very shortly after our relationship began. And so it was like, okay, well, you know, maybe at the time Jim Zub was writing the comics, maybe Jim would write it, and Jim was like sort of getting a lot of work from the big two at that point, so he was sort of cresting out of the title. I think they took the idea to a couple other comic book writers, but it like was so thoroughly my idea from the very beginning, just in terms of how it all would tie together and how we would bring this character in, and here's what we can do in the RPG appendix, that finally I think they were just kind of like, all right, Eric, you can write this thing. And I really had already at that point written about half a dozen issues of the comic. Like I was thinking about writing Pathfinder Worldscape when I did my first story for the Goblins comic, you know, way back a couple of years ago. So this has been a project that I've been working on forever, pretty much since the very beginning. And it's about to come out. We send the final files for issue number 1 to the printer in about 8 or 9 days. I'm currently, James and Wes are looking at my Red Sonja archetype that I designed so I could stat her up appropriately. And so they'll look at it and give me my comments, and then I'll give it to Jason Bowman, and he'll completely eviscerate it and nerf it, and probably for good, you know. And then once that's been kind of vetted by the senior staff, then I'll actually do her stat block in earnest. But all that's got to happen in the next like 5 or 6 days. So like we're pretty much there. And I just got some pages from issue number 2, some colored pages. It's looking great. I'm working on the script for number 4 right now. I've got 5 completely outlined, and then 6 I've got kind of a summary of what's got to be in there. It's a 6-issue series, and there's a lot to fit in. There's a lot of characters, you know. But I'm doing my best, and I'm really happy with how it's turned out, and it's really fun and sort of humbling to get to use, you know, Red Sonja and John Carter and Tarzan and all these other characters that, you know, have been. I mean, you know, one of the things, we're also using a character called Thunda, who was from 1950, and is a character created by Frank Frazetta, kind of in the Tarzan mold, but more of a lost land. He fights dinosaurs and cavemen and stuff like that. Less of an Africa thing. And even though his comic is called King of the Congo, he's in this weird thing called the Dawnlands, which I really liked. And so, you know, I'm writing a comic right now featuring characters created by Robert E. Howard, Edgar Rice Burroughs, and Frank Frazetta. It's like, holy shit, you know, that's not nothing for like a big fantasy nerd like me, and so I'm just trying to do right by those characters, and also make it feel authentically Pathfinder. And you know, there's no question about it, even with all these other characters, you know, Sione, Valeros, Mauricio, and Kira, it's their story. It's a Pathfinder is the first word, Worldscape is the second word. And so yeah, it's been really, really gratifying and fun to do, and the culmination of 3-4 years of pitching and trying to get the, you know, the agreements all sorted out, and, you know, you can use these characters but you can't use these characters for whatever reason, and pretty happy with how it's turning out so far.
Sweet.
Do you expect this to really appeal to like Red Sonja fans and John Carter fans?
I hope so. You know, I mean, I'm trying to make it as authentic to those characters as I possibly can. You know, I a couple of weeks ago I read something like 70 Red Sonja comics all in 3 days, you know, and I've got copious notes in my notebook, not just for like, how do I stat up this character? So it's like every time she can track, you know, got to write that down. Oh, you know, she's like, I figured out, and I didn't really. This was a surprise to me, actually. When I went into, I was pretty sure Red Sonja, I wasn't going to want to stat her up as a barbarian, you know, because she doesn't rage, you know, it's not really what I wanted to do. And so, luckily, by reading through her origin and getting to understand that, you know, at least in the more recent version of the retelling of her origin by Gail Simone from a couple of years ago, which is really, really, really good. I really liked that take on the Red Sonja character. You know, she was a really wonderful hunter, you know, even as a little girl. And, you know, it's always talks about how she's a hunter and how she can track people. And it's like, okay, and she's really good with the bow, and she's good at fighting with 2 weapons. It's like, holy shit. Red Sonya's a ranger, you guys, and so then I'm creating right now I'm calling a sword devil archetype that swaps out the ranger stuff that she doesn't have, like spells and an animal companion and things, for stuff that's more authentically Red Sonja. And then I'll do the same thing with John Carter and Tars Tarkas. I'll do an archetype for them called the Warlord that will make it more plausible that they can run around with no armor. And really with all these pulpy characters, it's pretty much about how do you make them work in Pathfinder even though they're virtually naked. One of the things that I can say that I really enjoy, because Red Sonja is a character who at least the look of her has raised a few eyebrows, both good and bad over the years. And so, when we say, oh yeah, we've got Red Sonja in here, there's always been a few people who are like, oh, Red Sonja, that's just eye candy. But it's like kind of gratifying for me to be able to say, okay, out of Red Sonja, Tarzan, Thunda, Tars Tarkas, and John Carter, she's wearing the most clothes, you guys. It's like all the dudes in here are even more naked than her. So hopefully there's some eye candy for just about everybody in here. But I also am just trying to treat the characters respectfully, and part of that means research, and part of that means I reread a lot of the Burroughs novels. I've read all of the comics pretty much that Dynamite's published for those characters, and just trying to get a sense of their voice. And luckily, those characters all, I feel, have very strong voices. And so whether I pull it off or not, I think it's going to be for the readers to determine. But I'm pretty happy with getting to put words in their mouths, and certainly happy with just having the opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of happy.
Yay!
So here's a question that this one's tricky. You can at least answer from the Pathfinder point of view, because this is the Pathfinder Worldscape comic, and it takes place in Nex.
No, it takes place on a dimension, which is to say, in Pathfinder terms, probably a demi-plane, within the spire of Nex, which is a mile-tall tower outside of Absalom. So basically, everything I'm about to tell you does not matter at all for the comic book. It's just how I slot it kind of into Golarion. So the Spire of Nex is this mile-tall tower that has existed just outside of Absalom for like thousands of years. And it was from the Spire of Nex. It's one of the siege castles outside of Absalom. So it's from the Spire of Nex that Nex himself invaded Absalom in an attempt to take it over back before he vanished. And the idea is, within the Spire, there are no doors or windows or really obvious entrances to this edifice at all. And within the Spire of Nex, there are a stack of different demi-planes, all of which trap various monsters or creatures. And Nex was able to use that as a battery by which he created phantom soldiers and creatures, like phantom duplicates of all these people trapped within the Spire of Nex, and that's what he used as his army to attack Absalom. And so what the Worldscape is it's basically a honeydew trap for great warriors from 3 different worlds, Barsoom, Earth, and Golarion, who get sucked into this dimension, and Nex would then project like whatever specter versions or phantom versions of those heroes. But Nex has been dead for like thousands of years, but the plane just keeps collecting these heroes over all that time. And so it's technically geographically located within the Spire of Nex, but as of 4 issues, the words Spire of Nex do not even enter into the comic. You kind of got to figure it out yourself. But Nex himself does feature into at least some of the sort of loose exposition. But yeah, anyway, that's the secret history that really is not germane to the comic at all, but that Pathfinder fans will kind of go, oh, I see how it all fits in.
I guess my question was going to be, does this make it canon?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it does. Like the comic books, even when Jim Zub was writing them, and Jim's a good friend of the company, but of course he doesn't work at Paizo, but even when he did, I have what I call my editorial strike team, when it comes to approvals of Jim's scripts, and that team is James Jacobs, James Sutter, Wes Schneider, and myself. And we make sure that everything comports to continuity, and that it's all real in the comic, and like the history of Valeros as portrayed in the comic is the history of Valeros. It comports to his Meet the Iconic storyline. It's Valeros, right? And that is also true of the Worldscape. Now, you might ask, well, so what the hell? Are these characters, is Red Sonja going to show up in Pathfinder comics? That remains to be seen. There's some trickiness going on. I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too in a way that I think will become clear by reading the series.
Sweet. Now, this first issue launches in October?
October, yeah, from Dynamite. It's like all the previous Pathfinder comics. It will come with a RPG rules appendix. It will come with a little pull-out poster map. It's going to be really, really cool. I hope people like it. It's really fun to write.
Okay.
And so far, the people who have read it seem to be pretty pleased with it. There's some good old violence. There's some good old magic. There's lots of monsters, and some intrigue.
Let's say this is somebody's first Pathfinder comic, or even first introduction to all the characters in the book. How much exposition are we looking at?
Hopefully not too much. I think that I'm conscious of how exposition in comics sometimes it can seem, people don't like reading like Chris Claremont style pages with like 7,000 words on them like they might have in the 80s, and so I'm cognizant of that. I hope that there's just enough exposition that people understand how all these characters come together and what the worldscape is, but really it's about what's happening to the characters right now and not about what's happening. Like, for example, and this isn't too much of a spoiler because I think they put some of the pages online, but in Pathfinder Worldscape #1, the opening scene is the four Pathfinder Iconics, Valeros, Sione, Kira, and Mauricio fighting against Thulgrun, the Veiled Master, who was actually the villain from the City of Secrets arc, who you only saw as a Veiled Master for like one panel. And it's always bugged me that like he never came back. So I'm like, what the hell? And so I just throw him in there, fighting him in a sewer, and then something happens where all four of the heroes just kind of disappear, and they each manifest in the worldscape in a different place. And so issue 1 is really Valeros' story of him appearing in the worldscape, and then issue number 2 is Sione's story, and eventually it all ties back together. And so I'm trying to, even though there's a huge cast with this comic, introduce things in a smaller packets. So like, you don't have to deal with 8 characters in issue number 1. It's like Valeros and Red Sonja and a couple of other characters, many of whom Valeros kills. And anyway, like the idea is like Valeros wakes up next to this summoning pillar with a symbol of Nyx on it, and he's literally being like robbed by a couple of like no good Nyx from different worlds, and they're like, get his pouch, and he like wakes up being robbed, and then and got to figure out what the hell's going on. And so it starts with a couple of fight scenes. It's heavy on the action, but it's also, I hope, heavy on the kind of big concepts. And when you've got this world which literally is pulling people from multiple different expressions of multiple different worlds over multiple different eras, it really gives you the opportunity to do some amazingly crazy stuff. There's a panel in issue 2 that is just gorgeously done by the artist Jonathan Lau, and it turned out exactly like I wanted it to, and I'd love to show it to you guys, but I don't want to spoil it because it's like such a crazy incongruous idea that I think when people turn the page, they're just going to be like, what the F am I reading? And hopefully that'll be, not like, fuck this, and they throw it away, but they're like, what? I got to keep turning through, like, what's happening here? And so I'm very excited.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I just said the F word on your show.
Yeah, you totally did. You're going to have to do something about that.
Oh.
I like that you self-censored and then just let it go in the next sentence.
Yep. Sorry.
Oh, boy.
So we have been fans of the comic. I think Param and I have both enjoyed every series that's come out. But one of the things I was noticing about Jim Zub's series is that he was just kind of like, it was really focused on character relationships. And so, and one miniseries would end, it would be like, I want a lot more set in this world, and it was just like the pace wasn't quite working for me. So when you, Wes, and James took over, that's when it really felt like now it's more plot focused, and that was the pace I wanted for these 6-issue miniseries. And so that's one of the reasons I'm especially excited for this, because it's like you clearly have a vision for this, and now you've got a couple of series under your belt. So like, comics aren't old for you, but like you've got experience in it.
I'm learning how to do it a lot better, and again, it's not up to me, it's up to the readers and stuff whether they like it, but it's like it's an art, it really is, and more than that, I think writing comics is a puzzle, and that's kind of the part I like about it, is trying to like, okay, here's the things I want to have happen into this issue, and here's I think the order in which they're going to happen, and okay, and then you break that down to 22 pages, and then you're like, okay, this is probably going to take 5 panels to express this, and like by the time you sit down to actually write the dialogue, it's almost easy because you're just kind of filling in this like formula that you've created. And so, yeah, I think I think Worldscape is pretty heavy on plot, honestly. There's a lot going on, but hopefully that doesn't come at the expense of the character moments. The character moments I think are really important. Some of my favorite stuff that I've written in the comics so far have been character moments. And so I hope I balance it, and it's not just our characters, but these other companies' characters. So I really, really hope that I do it right. But yeah, Jim's strength, I think, or one of his strengths, he's got a lot of them, is in characters and characterization and development of relationships between characters. And so that was a really great sort of launching pad, I think, for James and Wes and I to kind of take things a step forward. And because we're just much more, I think, comfortable in Golarion since we made it up, and since we'd been kind of helping Jim with some of the continuity elements since the very beginning, then it was a really easy transition to us, just kind of, I don't want to say easy, but it was a smooth transition for us, just kind of taking it over ourselves. And I hope that Pathfinder fans feel like it's authentically Pathfinder, just the comic in general, but especially with Red Sonja and Thunda and Tarzan running around. I think it's Pathfinder.
Are James and Wes?
I'm giving you stats so that you can kill these characters if you really want. If you're angry about it, murder them. Everything's good. Are
James and Wes okay that they're not co-writing this series?
Yeah. I think we have. We've split up the duties, a few times, and I think it's partly because we just all really wanted to participate in it. But this Worldscape idea has been something I've been clamoring for since the very beginning, so I don't even think they would dare. I think Wes's comment on my series outline when I passed it around was like, I can't really say it because I would say that F word that I'm not supposed to say again, but it was something along the lines like, this is the craziest blanking thing I've ever read in my life. Awesome. And so like, I think it's really audacious in some ways, like what we're doing with this series. And I think that maybe only the guy who came up with it could really do it. I don't think they would want to do it to some degree. And frankly, neither of them quite have the pulp and the comic, history bug the way that I do. So I think that, if they were to do their own series, they would do something very, very different, probably equally or even more brilliant. But I don't know that they would. I don't know that their cylinders flicker the same way mine do, and it's like, oh, Red Sonja, what? John Carter, I think they're like, oh yeah, I saw that movie. Like they have their own different interests and influences, and so I would imagine that a James Sutter 6-issue series, which we may see one day, would be quite different than an Erik Mona one. Hopefully there'd be a consistent level of quality across the whole thing, but we each have our own. I mean, you can see our different voices just by looking at the different issues that we wrote for Origins, for example. I mean, they fit together, but they're all one-off stories, so you can get a sense of, some of us use a little more humor, some of us are a little, more interested in, just some of us have slightly different pacing, whatever. I mean, it's just the different people. So I don't know what happens yet after Worldscape. I think we'll talk about that in New York Comic Con next month when I go out and talk to the Dynamite folks. But, I'm doing a lot right now with my free time, so to speak. With orchestrating Worldscape. There's some game product for Worldscape that I'd like to do that I'm still kind of working through some of the ideas on, and that's kind of where I see myself focusing for the next couple of months after Worldscape is done. I probably won't roll into doing another. I'll probably get one of these guys a chance to maybe do their own thing, and then, who knows? My hope is that Worldscape is so successful that Dynamite goes, yeah, don't end it, just keep writing it. And then I'd be happy to do that pretty much forever. But, there comes a time where a boy needs to sleep, and I'm rapidly approaching that time.
Miss Roy in chat has an interesting theory. Is Valeros being robbed by Fafford and the Grey Mouser?
No, that would be awesome. Oh my God. Like if I could cast my own, fantasy team, regardless of who has the publishing rights to what, oh boy, Fafford and the Grey Mouser would be in there, Elric would be in there, there would be a lot of other characters that I would use, but I certainly have no complaints about the characters that Dynamite has. Dynamite's characters, I would say, are a little bit more pulp oriented than sword and sorcery, and so I would say that Pathfinder Worldscape has a little bit more of a pulp flair to it overall. There's an army of the worst gorilla scum from 3 different worlds, for example, and that's like a very comic booky idea, but it's also kind of a pulp idea. And there's, dark jungles and ruined cities and, immortal empresses and all kinds of crazy pulp stuff. And so I think that if, for example, if I'd had, if I was doing a Worldscape series that would use Flash Gordon, which this one doesn't, it would be a different feel to the one that I'm doing with these characters. And if I was going to do one with Elric and Conan and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse, I probably would still use Red Sonja in that one. That would be a little bit more of a sort of a blood and thunder, just full on sword and sorcery series. But yeah, it'd be really fun over the years to get to. Hopefully, this is a successful series. It'd be fun to revisit it with different properties. We've got this location that could theoretically bring in characters from any property, and I've got sort of my secondary wish list. I'd love to get some Turok the dinosaur hunter up in here. Some of the other characters that Dynamite has. But first things first. We'll see how this one goes.
Is there any chance Pathfinder will ever meet Archie?
Sure. I think it's a really interesting idea. I think, got to get some Kevin Keller up in here and some Veronica. I'd like to see the Betty versus Sione fight for the finish. I have no idea. I'm not that into. I guess what they've been doing with Archie the last couple of years is really interesting. They've editorially done some things you never would have expected out of Archie. There's a new Archie series coming out, I think, on the CW. So I think Archie is in the ascendance, but I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine Riverdale, Harsk and Riverdale or something like that. I think it'd be fun. The one I'd really like to do, one I'd really like to do, and that I've actually kind of obliquely discussed with Dynamite, is Dynamite has the Army of Darkness license, so it'd be kind of fun to have Ash, interact with the Pathfinder guys. But I there is an element to it too where these crossovers is kind of a gimmick, and I don't want it to overstay its welcome. I want to do Pathfinder comics that are Pathfinder comics as well. So Archie, maybe not Jughead.
All right, it is 10 o'clock. We're starting to wrap things up. Let me just see if we've missed anything from chat. We've missed a lot of small questions, and we can just kind of load you with another hour of small questions, but I want to see if there's anything really significant that we could wrap things up with.
Well, James Jacobs just came to my window of my office and held up the Ash versus Evil Dead Blu-ray that he's bringing me so I can finally watch the audio commentary on that. So that's exciting. I can't think of a better way to end that. I don't know. It's a huge, exciting year. We got all kinds of stuff. I think, I think the big takeaway for people who are like, what's going on with the Encounter Codex and kind of how we started the interview is like, there is some crazy stuff coming in 2017 that you guys have not even heard about yet that I'm still busting out on my staff at this point, so like it's there is going to be more Pathfinder stuff than anyone realizes, and some really, really neat stuff that I think people are going to really dig. So
sweet.
Yeah, we definitely, because before Bestiary 6 was announced, we thought we knew about 2017. I wouldn't say we know that much more about 2017, but at least we don't have false expectations of 2017.
Yeah, I hope not. I don't want to give anybody false expectations, but the one true expectation that I'd like to leave people with is there are major Pathfinder hardcovers coming in 2017 that no one outside this building has really heard of, and that I think people are going to be pretty excited about. And when I announce the first one of those, maybe I'll come back and talk to you because I think it might represent a little bit of a shift in the way we've been doing some things in a way that I think people are going to find pretty refreshing. So, but that's all I'll say about it right now.
Okay, cool. I'm excited to speculate on a lot of the things you've alluded to.
Please do. Yeah.
Probably not this episode, but maybe next episode we'll just be in like.
You got to do the whole Erik Mona interview follow-up episode where you pick everything apart like a forensic anthropologist to see what I accidentally revealed, and you can zoom in on all the stuff in the background and see if there's any clues in my office mess and art and all that kind of stuff.
Now you see how his pulse quickens on his neck when he starts talking about this.
Exactly. Exactly. I do. I got to give you credit for your Cobra Commander poster behind you.
Oh,
as well.
have you gotten a tour of my office? Because I've got the
now I'm getting
sign on the wall.
now I'm getting sick for some reason. But is that Sergeant Slaughter?
Yes. So let me see if I can zoom in properly. I've got a picture of me with Sergeant Slaughter.
So do I.
A picture of me as a Sergeant Slaughter for Halloween.
Oh, a picture of you as Sergeant Slaughter.
And a picture of me like with buddying up with Sergeant Slaughter.
Are you dressed as Sergeant Slaughter? Are you like
not at the time? No, these are two different events.
I met Sergeant Slaughter, maybe the same place you did. He was at New York Comic Con last year or 2 years ago.
Right.
Very rarely will I pay a celebrity money to like get their autograph. It's just, it's like going to cosplay at a convention when you're working in the industry. It just seems like something I don't really want to do. But like, I couldn't resist, and so I had to pay Sergeant Slaughter to get his autograph. And like, he put me in the Cobra clutch, in the picture. Did he do that to you? Are you being Cobra clutched in your picture?
No, we're just buddies.
I got some of the buddy pictures too, but the most important one is where he's just abusing me with the Cobra clutch. Yeah. I think that's on my my Facebook fan page, the Erik Mona author on Facebook. If you really want to see me being manhandled by the likes of the Sergeant Slaughter, that's a great place to go. Otherwise, if you want to just kind of see what I'm up to on a day-to-day basis, I would recommend following me, Erik Mona, at Erik Mona on Twitter. That's Erik with a K. And every once in a while, I post something of interest. I hope.
Excellent. All right, Param, I think we're ready to wrap things up. No need to transition to the shoutouts, right?
Nope.
All right. Good. Well, thank you for joining us for episode 140 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
Thank you once again for joining us, Erik Mona.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure talking to you guys.
And until next time, if you want to find the path, you need no direction.